السلام عليكم everyone. I hope كلشي لاباس عليه كلشي بخير. مرحبا بكم اليوم في another live تاع انسياس اي تي كلوب. هاد اللايف يكون شويه سبيشال with a special guest. الجيست تاعنا اليوم هو the founder of Angular, the founder of Qwik, and the CTO of Builder.ai. So I let him first give a short introduction about himself. So, hello, Miško.
Hey, how's it going? Yes.
Fine, very good.
I'm Miško, CTO of Builder.io. Builder.io is like a headless visual CMS systems, and we really want the world to have faster websites. It benefits us and it benefits other people, and so we're working on two cool technologies. One is Qwik, which I'm going to talk to you about today, and the other one is PartyTown, which allows for running third-party code in a web worker. Anyways, so that's about me. And yes, I've in the past I've done this thing called AngularJS, Angular, and now I moved on and I'm working on a new kind of framework, Qwik, and I'm hoping to today to kind of show you how Qwik is different, and hopefully when we are done here today, you're gonna walk away and being like, wow, Qwik is like nothing I've ever seen before. That's my goal. So let's see if we can get there.
Yeah. I want first to thank you about accepting our invitation and to be here with us for this live. And I guess I'll let the stage to you. You can begin the workshop. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have people that can ask questions, or this is gonna be just me talking for 2 hours?
Yeah, you can ask questions, and the people can comment their questions and their responses in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Oh, I see it. It's in the question section.
Yeah.
I love questions, so don't hesitate to ask. Don't make me talk for 2 hours straight. I already heard this presentation, so if you have questions, ask away. And if I don't, I'm going to be typing a lot on the keyboard, so I might miss your questions. So, Rudain, if you see it, stop me, let me know, so I can answer it, and then we can go back into it.
For sure.
Okay. But yeah, ask away. Don't make this, a long, boring presentation on my part. Ask and make it interesting for both me and for yourself. Okay, let's see. Let's share our screen. Present. Screen. Entire screen. This one. Okay. So we are. Can you see the presentation? I mean, oh, perfect. Yes.
No.
So we're gonna. Okay, we are going to be building a Qwik application, and so I wanted to do a couple of things for you. And you can follow along on this URL, which is GitHub/mhevery/Qwik workshop. And the lessons we're going to go through are right here. And so you can follow along. And the first lesson is just going to be installing Qwik. And so that's pretty straightforward. So let's just do that. I'm going to say npm create Qwik at latest and let the magic begin. Yep. It's going to ask for a name. So let's say qwik.workshop. Let's see, basic app. Yep, all sounds good. And you have to have a joke. Anyways, that's my joke for today. While npm dependencies are loading, okay, there we go. And so now let's open up a Qwik workshop like here. And once we have here, what we can do is we can go to npm run dev. And so if we did all of our pieces right, let me make this full screen. Then localhost 5173. There we go. And so we have a simple application up and running with kind of the basic content in a UI. Let's build something. Let's build a particular route. So let's see, let's go back to our here. So that'll be done lesson 1. And so let's make a route like this one right here. And the way you do routing in Qwik is that you go to the source folder. There's some special folder called routes. And let's make a new file in here. And so let's see, we created a folder called GitHub. Inside of it, we created a subfolder called user. And in here, we have a component. And let's create a component. It has to be a default component, like so. And so this gives us a hello Qwik. And if I go here and go to GitHub/Hevery, let's say, it shows hello Qwik, right? So it's very easy to create new routes for your application. Now, so far, I've not really shown you anything that's really that exciting. You can do this in just about any meta framework. So let's differentiate stuff with Qwik a little bit. Let's write out, how about we say render. So what I want to show you is this console log runs on the server. And you can see that it's running on a server. By the way, is the font size good or should we make the font bigger?
I guess it's good.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so let's make this font size a little bigger. Okay, so if I go to the console tab over here, you'll see that if I refresh the page, the console log never made it to the client, right? The system correctly deduced like, oh, you don't need this particular piece of code, so I'm not going to send it to you. Now I know you can really take any framework and basically disable JavaScript and the code doesn't show up in there, so that's not really that exciting. But what I'm going to show you though is that you can now mix and match code that will show up and code that will not show up, and that is something that is unique. So let's give it an interaction. So let's create a button here, hello, and on click console.log hello. And so now we have a button, and if I click this button, it says hello, right? Nothing really exciting. But here's the exciting bit. No JavaScript. Click hello, JavaScript shows up, and if I click on the JavaScript, you're going to notice that only the relevant piece of code showed up, right? So only the console log showed up, nothing else. Because the system kind of looked at it and said like, sure, you have a component here, you have a text here, etc. But really the only thing you need is this piece over here and nothing else. Now, if you think about it, this is hard because how can you import just that piece of code? Like this console log is buried deep inside of the component and there is no way to import it. So what the $ does over here is the $ takes the code and says export click equals something like this. right? And by moving the code into a top level location, now we can export it. And now it is possible to import just the code necessary for this particular part and nothing else. Okay, but let me show you the next bit that makes this thing kind of complicated. So let's create a counter. And now we create a new button called +1. And let's create a count value. Okay, so now we have a button that says 1, 2, 3, and there's a +1 in here. And again, no JavaScript is showing up. And when I click +1, oh, I forgot to put the code in here. +1, count value, ++. Okay, so if I click +1, now the only thing that showed up is the code for the listener. This time the framework has to show up, right? Because it's, you know, in the first case, if I just hit hello, framework doesn't need to show up. But if I hit here, now the framework has to show up because we need to update the UI. And there's this build file over here. And now you can see that as I click on it, it correctly updates the value. And so this is the heart of Qwik. This is the magical part of Qwik, which is that it only downloads the code that is necessary for performing the operation that you want. And more importantly, it does not start with any code at the beginning. Now, the other thing I want to point out for you is that when I go and I interact and I hit +1, notice that it's updating it, but this piece of code here never made it to the client. So most frameworks, you can lazy load components, but you can't really lazy load individual functions. Like in this particular case, the system decided like, yeah, this piece of code is unnecessary on the client, so I'm not going to send it to the client, and only the click listener is necessary. And you know, the creation of the state is kind of important because if you try to take this code and export it, notice the problem. This count is closing over a variable that's declared in the top level component. And so how is it supposed to work? Like how can you you know, execute this piece of code like that? And so if you look at it, if you hit +1 here, what you see is that it generated an extra piece of code to recover the missing state of the system. And by recovering the missing state of the system, the application can continue resuming. Now, I think at this point we should kind of stop and think about something interesting, which is many frameworks know how to lazy load components. However, they all start executing at the root component, right? Because no matter what kind of lazy loading system do you have, the execution of the application starts at the root component. There is a main entry point, and the main entry point is something like render my root application. And then as you are rendering the application, the renderer visits the root component. From the root component, it goes to child components, the layout components, you know, the component that creates the header, the footer, in our case, the component that gives us the example. And as it's traversing all these components, the framework is learning about where the components are, it's learning about where the listeners are, and it's learning about what the state of the system is. In our case, the state of the system is 1, 2, 3. And when it executes all of your application, then the application becomes interactive. And we call this hydration. But in the case of a Qwik, there is no hydration, right? When we start executing the application, we don't start at the root. We start at the event handler, right? This is our entry into the system. And so one of the things that Qwik does is it creates lots and lots of entry points so that you don't necessarily have to start at the beginning of the application. You can start in other places. So other frameworks can lazy load, but they always start at the root, and from the root, they can lazy load other parts. Qwik flips the whole thing upside down and says, no, we don't start at the root. We start with the event handler. No event handler, there's nothing to do. and you can enter the application in any event handler you want. So in this particular case, there are two entry points, right? We can enter the application by clicking on this button, or we can enter the application by clicking on this button. And both of these entry points are equivalent, and this is really what the heart of resumability is. Now, let me show you what this kind of looks like in visa.co. Let me see if I got this right. No, I got it wrong. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Let me just get me the correct visa. Visa. Okay, sorry. Visa.com. Okay, so this is an application somebody built with Qwik. And I want to show you how this application works. So let's refresh this again and go to JavaScript and go to Qwik. Okay, so this is the code that is needed. So if you look at this button here, this button is kind of nicely animated. And so this JavaScript is needed to animate this piece of code. And let me show you, pay attention to what's happening to the network. And as I start scrolling, notice more and more code is showing up, right? Because there's a new animation in here. New animation, more code shows up. New animation, more code shows up. And as I'm scrolling, the more and more application is showing up. And so now we are in the world where we are not overwhelming the browser with all of this JavaScript all at once, right? We start with no JavaScript, and as the code is needed, we pull in more and more stuff. If this was a normal hydration-based system, the hydration would require that all of the components on the page, whether static or interactive, whether they have hydration or not, would have to be downloaded and executed. Instead, the only code that downloads is the animation code, and all of the other content, all the components that are associated over here are static, and they are actually not needed. So the amount of code that you download is a lot less. Now, I know what you're thinking. Let's go over here. If I go click on this button, it's already preloaded. Let's go into a different website. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking like, right, but doesn't that mean that if I have a button and I want to interact with it and I click on it, there will be a delay in network? Why didn't that show up? Hold on. Okay, we go. Click. There will be a delay in the network that's in here. Well, it turns out that we have something called a service worker. And service worker's job is to prefetch all of the code and put it in the browser's cache. So in this particular case, you can see that to activate the menu, I needed all of these components. But if I go to here, you can see that the service worker prefetched a lot more code than that. About 65 different bundles got prefetched by the service worker, but I only need maybe 10 of them right over here. And so what is this world, what does it look like on a slow 3G? Actually, before we do that, we're going to go to here and we're going to delete the cache so that we don't have any cache. And I'm going to go to the service worker and we're going to unregister it. Unregister and unregister, right? So now we're simulating that we are navigating to the first page very first time. And I want to show you that as soon as the button becomes available, I can click on it and it is interactive, right? Even though if you go to the network, you can see that well, it already finished, but you can see that the network is prefetching more and more things. Actually, let's do it again. Let's go application. Let's go to storage. Delete the cache of the browser. Come on, delete. Service worker, unregister, unregister, network. Okay, so here is all the JavaScript that's being fetched. Let me refresh it. As soon as the button comes up, I'm going to click on it and I can do so. And you can see that the responses were super fast. They were up there because the service worker was able to go and prefetch all of the code and make it available on interaction. And so now, even if I go and become offline, I go to the tunnel, I can interact with the code and you can see more JavaScript shows up and I can search with it, etc. Everything works because the service worker prefetched it, right? So it doesn't mean that there's any sort of delay. Now, the next thing you might be asking yourself is, how does this work? How do you know what code to prefetch? Well, when the application is running, it sends information into this thing called the Qwik Insights. This is optional, you don't have to do it. And in Qwik Insights, what we do is we create a correlation matrix. Basically, it shows you, hey, if you need this piece of code, there is an 80% chance you're also going to need this other piece of code. Or if we do something lower probability like over here, sometimes when you need this piece of code, you might also need this other piece of code. And so this is how the users are actually using your application. And using this information, the insights can create idealized bundles. So basically in here, we're saying, hey, I think you should take all of this code that you see over here, and you can see what code it is, and you can see that it's kind of all related, and put it in one bundle. And take all of this code and put it in another bundle, and so on and so forth. And so this can limit the amount of waterfall effect that you have when you have code, because this forces all the code to be prefetched, put together into related things. Now, once you have this information, the second thing you can do is you can go into route information, and there's a bug in Netlify, and this shows you how different functions are needed over the lifetime of the application for this particular route. So this piece of code is needed eagerly. This is for theming, right? Everybody who navigates to the page, we need to select the correct theme for them. So this is the first piece of code that needs to download. And then as if you go down lower, you can see like, oh, this is a search box. Not everybody goes and navigates to a search box. Question?
I guess there are no questions, but if anyone has any questions, please just write them down in the comments, and
Yes.
Miško will answer for sure.
So here we kind of figure out in which order. So we're trying to solve two questions, right? With bundles, we're going to try to make sure we optimize waterfall effect. And with this thing, we basically tell the system in which order the code has to be downloaded so that there is the least amount of the least amount of delay, right? So the system starts downloading the theme code, because that's the first code that you're going to need. And then it downloads other bits of code as available, and in a code that very few people use, like for example, if you scroll to the bottom, what is doesn't scroll very well. Let's see. This is a piece of code that has to do with playing with code blocks. Very few people actually do this, so we download that code last. And so in this way, we can have the best possible interaction, even on slow 3D networks. Okay, so that's kind of the background. And let's go back to our code.
We have a question actually.
Question. Isn't caching the bundles kind of the same thing as loading everything? Yeah, excellent question. Like it's not the whole JS, but it's still a big part of the code. Okay, excellent question. So it is different in several different ways, okay? First big difference is that the work of fetching the code is done in a service worker rather than on the main thread. And because your modern devices are multi-core, you can take advantage of that. But JavaScript is single-threaded. So if you do all the work on the main thread, you are going to keep the main thread busy, which means the main thread cannot be used for user interaction, right? So the first benefit is you are running it on a separate core and a separate thread in a web worker, service worker. The second benefit is that in Qwik, no code actually gets executed until you interact, right? As I've shown you here, this application, no code downloads until you're interacting it, right? So there's a big difference between downloading the code and executing the code and just downloading the code, right? And I'm going to actually argue that in most systems, the execution code of the code is actually the problem, not the download of the code. Okay, and the last big difference is that normal systems have to download all of the code needed for hydration. Basically, every single component on this page has to be downloaded and executed in order to have hydration. I have JavaScript turned off. Let me turn on JavaScript. Is that what it is? No, not sure why that is. Okay, every single component here has to be downloaded and executed. Whereas with resumability, we are only going to execute a small, tiny portion of all the available code, right? So we do it on a separate thread. We download a lot less than you would normally download. And then the thing we download, we don't eagerly execute. So those things all together make a huge, huge difference in between the two approaches. But a very common question. Okay, where was I? Okay, let's see, where was, no, where's my GitHub? Oh, here we go, here's our lesson. Okay, so we created a component and I showed you how to kind of work with it. And so the next thing to do is let's use a third-party library. So this is a OctoKit, we're gonna talk to GitHub. And so I'm gonna install the type system for the GitHub, right? This has nothing to do with Qwik, this is a third-party library. And once I have that, I can import it and I can get any particular path of the type. So we don't really have to talk about this, but let's say I would paste this here and I'm going to restart my server. Okay, and so now we need to fetch data from the server. Okay, so the way we do data fetching is we say export const use, this is going to be a user, so let's call it a user repo equals route loader, and in here it's going to be an async function, and we are going to get params. Well, I think we can do this. I think, let's see, how does this work? Yeah, params and, okay, so params and environment, okay. Okay, so this piece of code here will execute on a server. So for now, I'm gonna just cheat. I'm gonna just say return server data, like this. And so now we can go to our client, and I'm gonna delete all the content here. And I'm gonna say h1, sorry, not like this. Repository is, and we need to get a hold of the data, const data, which is user repo equals use user repo, like this. And now I can do user repo.value. So this piece of code right here will always run on a server. Right? Whereas this piece of code right here is isomorphic, which means it may run on the server or on the client, depending on circumstances and so on and so forth. So you can kind of think of it as maybe here or maybe there, but this for sure will only run on the server. And why are you unknown? What? Oh, sorry, because this has to be, no, route loader, what's the issue? Why is it complaining? Yeah, okay, I know it's declared and never used. Oh, that's weird, okay. So now notice that we know that this is a read-only signal of a string. If I, for example, say name here, now it will say like, oh, this is a name. So the type information correctly flows, and now we have to put a name here. Okay, so let's get rid of this stuff here. So now if I go to my application, you can see that it says, oh, that's I'm sharing here. Let's make this a little smaller. I can see that it says repository server data, and this piece of data came from the server. So now let's load the data from an actual place. And I am going to do that by calling a fetch. So instead of typing it all up, I'm gonna cheat here. So what we're doing here is we're on a server, and so we are gonna go and fetch data from GitHub, right? So GitHub has API, so I can go talk to GitHub, and I'm gonna grab the user from the params, right? So the params are here. And so the user comes from the fact that our URL contains a user slug inside of the URL, right? So this this Hevery that's in here will be extracted as a user and passed into my code on here. So on a server, when I navigate to this particular page, this user will say Hevery, and then I can talk to GitHub to get a list of repos from there. Now, I'm also going to need a private key as an access token. And I am just going to cheat for a second. And I'm going to, let's see, copy Qwik workshop. Okay, I'm going to copy a environment file so that I can have the GitHub private access token. You can follow the directions on how to set that up. It's inside of, if I open up the env, do I have it? Oh no, it's not in here. If you go to here, you can see there's an env file, and this env file will basically give you directions on how to get these private keys for yourself. So let's go back to lesson 2. Okay, so now we're going to fetch the data, and now notice, because we did a cast over here, it knows that there's no such thing as a user. And what is there? Is it login? No, what am I? It's name. No, what is it? Yeah, it's a name, right? Why doesn't that name work? Oh, is it owner? No, it should be name. What's going on here? What is going on? It's right here. How does it? Oh, because is it an array? Wait, this is an array, isn't it? Oh, sorry, my fault. Ah, these are all the repos because it's an array. Okay. Sorry, sanity returned. Okay, so we need to print a name here. Okay, let's do that later. Okay, so we have we have a ordered unordered list, and so in here we want to do user repo dot value map li repo here we go. So if I navigate to Hevery, you can see that these are all the repos that I have, and I believe I can, yeah, I can get 100, I can get all of them in here. So now you have a longer list of all the repos that I have over here, right? So what we're doing is on a server, we're fetching data. So you want to do pre-fetching, right? So when the request comes in, or immediately on a side, you wanted to go and start fetching the data on a server and then start streaming the response, the HTML. And of course, you cannot stream the response over here until the data is available. And if you look at the output, you can see that the server executes on a server, and then the isomorphic part executes on the client. And we go over here, and if you go to the network tab and we could look at the JavaScript, we see that there is no JavaScript coming on the client. So the next thing we could do is we could have a search box in here. Oh, by the way, so here we need to put not TBD, we want to say Hevery. So we can go and say location equals use location, and now the repository is location dot params dot user, right? So now it says repository Hevery, and then here is all of the items that we have in my list. Now, one thing we could do is we can make it interactive. So we can say filter equals use signal, it's an empty string, and in here we can do an input box, almost, filter, and then I'm just going to print it out for a second so we can debug it. Right? So now there's an input box here, and if I type into it, you can see that the output of it shows up. And you can also see that, hey, only the relevant piece of code shows up, right? Only the code for binding the listener for the input shows up, the framework, and nothing else. But what we can do now is use this filter to filter the values, right? So if we have value here, so we can say filter repo is repo dot full name index of filter dot value is not equal to -1. Okay, and so now as I type, you can see that the list of items shrinks down depending on as I interact with the filter thing. And of course, more code shows up to support the particular thing. So the thing I want you to take away is that in Qwik, all applications really start static, and only the code necessary for that particular interaction shows up, and only it shows up when you actually need it. So it doesn't show up in the main thread eagerly, but in a service worker thread, the code gets prefetched in production so that the users will not have to have slow interaction, even on slow networks, or if they lose connectivity, etc. And so all of this thing kind of happens together.
So it's a good thing to hear that Qwik are very easy to use, I think, and also it's responsive and that stuff. So the question I have, just a little bit, I want to know if there is any relationship between Qwik and Builder.io, because I think there is some predefined models in that sense.
Yeah, so Qwik is a general purpose framework, and you can use it for anything you want. You can integrate Qwik with Builder.io. So we can do this here. npm run Qwik add Builder.io. Where is it? Integration. Here we go. So we can install Builder.io. And when I do that, hold on, I have to run the server again. And let's go to a, okay, so now let's get started. So he's gonna have to connect to our server. Let's do that quickly. Yes, authorize. Okay, so now we have our application, and the application can actually work on different pages. Let's see if I have a page available. It's actually, let me get rid of the default page index, this one. Okay, that was not it. How do I undo this? Sorry, 1 second. This one, go back. That's not what I wanted to rename. Yeah, I don't have this thing. Let's see. Sorry, you kind of derailed me slightly because you asked about it. I want to go to. Okay, come on. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't quite ready for that demo, so I don't have the right pieces working. Well, I'm just going to talk about it a little. So the idea is with Builder.io, you can integrate a headless visual CMS system into your thing, and then you can have developers be able to just use it. I think it is. Qwik, is that it? Maybe. Yeah, sorry, I don't. Oh, okay, so the file exists. What? Where is it coming from? GA. Oh yeah, this import is wrong. Oh, that's what's messing it up. This import is wrong. Okay, so now the real question is, what is this API? Here, this is the key. EMV. Okay, that's the wrong key. This is the right key. Okay. I have to restart the server probably. Right, so you can see that this is not running inside of our site, but I'm not sure why it's not running here because, let's see, routes, this is a catchable route here, yeah. Page not found. Why is it not found? Because builder model is page. What is this? Is that a page? These are all pages. Qwik. Why am I copying that? Ugh. Oh, sorry, one second. Save the CD. Workshop.
This is software engineering, always debugging.
Yes, always not working what you want. This is the key I want.
Yeah.
This is the key I want. Yes, yay! Okay, now we have the, okay. So now notice this homepage, right, is actually in the builder. Okay, sorry it took so long. So we can go and we can edit this page, and you know, the header, this header is coming from our application, but this content, we didn't create this content inside of the application, right? Instead, this content is coming from a CMS, and we can go, oops, and use the CMS. I don't have it set up yet, so I'm just going to manually copy this over. And notice now we have this particular content and we can move things around. We can, for example, decide like, oh, we would like the counter to be, higher up, like over here. And then when I hit publish, if I go here, it usually takes about a minute for a few seconds for the changes to propagate. But now you go. Now the UI of the application has changed based on a editor. So the idea of the builder IO is that you set up a way for your creative folks, like marketing department, to be able to move things around and change things and do A/B testing and schedule when it's being published, etc., without having to bother the engineers with all the stuff that we don't want to work on, right? But as engineers, we wanted to create a component. So for example, this thing right here, it shows up as a counter. And it's because that counter is a custom component that the marketing person can drag and drop into it, right? So if we want to have two components, we can just drag another copy of the counter. We have now two counters on a page. And if I publish this, then in about 20 seconds or so, this particular thing should also show up on the client. This thing is huge. Okay. Right, and so now I can go and affect that. So this is the idea behind Builder CMS, is that you can go and change things and do it. Now, you might have done something like Wix, and Wix allows you to, to build websites. However, Wix has to be hosted with Wix, which means that you cannot have your own custom backend and your own custom code and data fetching and etc. Whereas here, you have a drag and drop editor, right? You have a full drag and drop editor with components, but we own the website, right? If you look at it, we, the engineers, own the code behind this, and we can change things and update things, etc. And we also own the components that the marketing people can drag and drop. Make sense?
Yeah, that's makes all the sense. So there is a question to lead the talk. It's about the data. Is there is a risk infection or something?
Is there a risk of overfetching the data? You mean like the code here? Well, the way to look at it is, what is the consequence of doing too much or too little, right? And so in Qwik, if you don't fetch enough, the application still works. It's not broken. It just means that you now have to fetch it lazily when it actually shows up, right? So user might see a small delay in it if you kind of missed it. On the other hand, if you overfetch, the worst thing that happens is you download the whole application, and we already download the whole application with the hydration. So the worst thing that can happen is that we would download everything that hydration needs, but we still don't have to execute everything that hydration really needs, right? Because hydration is not just about downloading, it's also about execution. And I would say that the execution is about 80% of the problem, right? Certainly downloading is a problem, but it's really the execution that is the problematic bit. Somebody's asking, is Qwik faster than React Server Component? Yes, actually, I am working on a demo that I'm going to release hopefully soon, where you can compare how Qwik and React Server Components work and how much data is available. The thing to understand about React is that the server components do not hydrate on a client. That is true, but the client components still do. And if you look at our code, let's see, where's our code? Okay, here's our code right here, right? This, if I take out the filter, if I comment out this piece of code right here, then this could be a server component. But the moment you add state and interactivity, like in this case, it can no longer be a server component. It has to be a client component, right? Whereas in Qwik, there is no difference. Like it's server-side rendered and no hydration, whether or not you have interactivity in there or not. And if you add interactivity, well, the interactivity just shows up a little later as necessary. Hopefully that answers the question. All right, let's see. Where were we with?
I think the question was answered clearly. So I want to just know how we can fetch data with Qwik. Is it the same with JS, or there is another syntax to something?
How can you, what do you mean, how
Fetch?
can you fetch? Fetch
Yeah.
what?
Fetch data from another backend
Yeah, so
API.
this is the, here, this is running on a server. And so you can do whatever fetching, database calls, file system access, whatever you want, you can do in the backend over here, right? So for example, let's say we wanted to get a package from the server. We can make another route loader. And yes, and here we do return. Using that parse string read file. Yes, package.json. This needs to be await. Why are you not happy? Oh yeah, wrong one. Okay, and return and as name string. Okay, so we can go and read data. Reading file can only happen on the server, right? So now we can go and use it just like this: const package use package, right? And so maybe in here on the bottom we will just do pre JSON dot stringify package dot value no.2. Why are you complaining? Oh, it's reserved keyword. You're not allowed to have a variable called package. Okay, so now we have our package data from the server showing up on the client. And so the interesting thing is that these functions are composable, right? I can create as many route loaders as I want, which is, by the way, not possible with other frameworks. They require you that you have exactly one route loader. And because of that, it's not composable. But this is composable. I can, just grab, these two are composable, right? I can grab as many as I want. Also, the type information flows correctly, and I don't have to use the use method in a top level component. I don't have other components here, but if I did, I could just pass the use method somewhere else, and we could have all the pieces come together in here as well. So this is basically how we do data fetching here. But I'm going to show you, actually, let's take a little detour, and I'm going to show you something that I think is super, super cool. Let's make a new folder called watch/index.tsx. So if this is not what you want, you can also do what we call server $. And I think server $, is very cool. Oh man, what just did? Ugh. Man. Okay, let's create a component. Let's see, const files equals store, and it's going to be a string array like this. And let's have files. Let's have a button. And we will our list. And here we do yes, thank you. Files, map file. Okay, perfect. So if we go to a watch URL, we have a button that doesn't really do anything, and maybe we put in some files in here, maybe just to kind of see that we are rendering the files over here, right? Now, Node.js has this cool API called watch. Okay, and this is how you can watch the files. So let me show you this. So we are in a button on click, async, and let's say instead of console logging the thing, I'm going to do files.push and then .file name. Okay, why are you unhappy with me? Oh, that's why. No? No, that was correct. Why are you unhappy with me? Yeah, that's correct. Why is this unhappy? Must have a one parent element. What? Yeah, so that's fine. Why is this 408? What? Oh, gosh. Extra parentheses here. Sorry about that. Okay, so fs watch. Okay. Sure. Okay. So this is a click, and this can't possibly work on the client, right? Because if I go to the client and I click the watch button, it's gonna like complain saying fs promises don't exist on the client. What are you doing? This is not a thing. You can't do that. So what we can do is we can do an RPC. We can basically say server dollar like this. And now because it's RPC, we have to do a wait. And why complaining? What could be a buffer? What? Fine. Okay. And now this will actually work. So if I click the button, what is wrong here? I could promise. Okay. Oh, to refresh the page. What? Oh, why did I do this? Sorry. Here we go. If I click the button and I do console, now nothing's happening, but nothing's going on because it's watching files on a server and now nothing's happening. So let's open up a file console, and I am in the wrong location. Click. Which one is this? This one is. Oh no, I'm in correct location. Right? So as I'm touching files on a server, they show up in the client. And so you should be both confused and impressed at the same time, because you cannot do this in any other world. So one of the things we talk about in Qwik is that you have a unified execution model, right? The code you write is code both for the server and the client, and it generally just runs in the correct location unless you want to force it running in a specific place, like putting a server dollar around it, and then you can force it. And so what I find super interesting, right, is that you can take existing APIs like watch, and they just naturally work. And specifically, because the watch API returns something called a async iterable, it automatically works with streaming, right? You can see that we are streaming the responses. So as you go and interact with the files, the server fires an event, which then causes this 408 to execute one loop, and this one loop then causes the UI to update. And so this is what we really mean by a unified execution model, right? Like, don't think of it as server and client, just think of it as my virtual machine started executing here and then it got moved to the client and the rest stuff just kind of happens, unless I want to specifically say this always has to run on a server. So the server dollar is basically an RPC mechanism. And so using the RPC mechanism, you can at any point jump to the server and do whatever you want on a server. Now, you can only do stuff, or you can only execute code on a server that existed at the time of compilation. So it's not like you can just inject anything you want. It doesn't work that way. But it fundamentally just creates an RPC point without you having to do anything. Normally, if you want to have an RPC or a REST endpoint, you have to create a REST endpoint, you have to exploit it on URL, you have to worry about serialization and deserialization, you have to register it with some registry, right? There are many things you have to do in order to have a REST endpoint. Here, your REST endpoint is essentially created with 6 characters. And I think that's pretty cool. Let's see, other questions.
There is another question here by
Yeah. So that's also a very common question that people ask. So systems like React need some kind of a state management. You don't have to use them. If you go back up a second, Redux essentially existed before React had hooks. Now that React has hooks, you can actually build systems without Redux, and it's unnecessary. The other thing that I want to point out is that Redux is a very much a React thing. Like Signals don't have Redux and they're just fine. Angular community doesn't have Redux, and so on and so forth, right? So Redux was a specific solution to a problem that React had before hooks existed. Now that you have use state, you don't need Redux either. Now, having said all that, Qwik state management system is based on signals rather than on state. And then there are some advantages over that we can talk about as well. I think most frameworks are moving towards signals. If you kind of pay attention to what's happening on Twitter or in the world, you can see a lot of talk about signals. Now, having said that, you can still use Redux with signals if you want. My argument though is you don't need to. If you really like it, go for it. But it's unnecessary.
I think here is another question by Hamza.
Yeah, is it possible to take this further and have a whole server dollar components that simulate backend? It is something that we are thinking about. By the way, we not only have a server dollar, we also have a worker dollar, which allows you to execute your code in a web worker. So you can kind of makes it relatively easy to have a multi-threaded system. So all of those things become possible. And then we are also thinking about having something like server component dollars so that individual components can always execute on a server as well. So there's a lot of possibilities that this building block kind of enables for the other systems. I like the question what Stefan says, is there any prerequisites to learning Qwik? Basic JavaScript is enough. If you have a React background, then you will be extremely familiar with Qwik because you have JSX that are hooks. Components are just functions. So it is a very common thing to kind of to be familiar with. So it's a good way to start. Having said that, though, you don't really need to have anything beyond that, but you do have to understand couple of things that are not available in React. The first thing is that you are working with signals, and there is what I consider to be a very shallow learning curve, but there is a learning curve for signals as well. Just like there was a learning curve for using hooks in React when they first came out, you had to learn about how the hooks was used, and there are rules about where you can use hooks and where you cannot. It's the same thing with signals. There are rules that you have to follow, etc. But once you learn them, it is super, super simple. The second thing you have to learn is that this $sign has rules as well. And specifically, what the dollar sign says is that whatever crosses a dollar sign boundary has to be serializable, right? And so this watch just happens to be returning a iterable, which is serializable, and it returns objects, plain JavaScript objects, which have strings, which is also iterable. If it would be returning something like a file system handle, that wouldn't work, right? Because you can't pass a non-serializable object across with it.
I think Kimoni ask a question about quick web structures. I really didn't understand the question. So if you understand
So
it,
yeah, so I think they're asking like, is there WebSockets underneath? No, there's not WebSockets. Actually, what it is, it's a long poll link. So in this particular case, if you go to the network tab, uh, the connection is, let's see, it's fetch, and it will be this one, and this is the payload. Right. So I think it's easier to kind of see it this way. Copy curl. Okay. So if I go and I make this request to the server, right? This is what I mean. It's just an RPC. Then as I touch files, you can see that you're going to get a single line of response, and the connection stays open. So every time I touch a file, you will get a one line of serializable data. So it is not WebSockets, it's just long polling. It's kind of simpler for this particular case. Yeah, that's basically the question. How do your mechanism handle concurrency in the execution model, especially in scenarios involving multiple components or complex UI? I think the answer is that this is just the standard way JavaScript works, right? You can only execute one piece of code at a time in JavaScript. And so your concurrency is really that you have microtasks that get scheduled in the future and the microtasks kind of work. And so it should be no different than what you are normally expecting, right? So you should be expecting that like, hey, there's an await keyword and therefore all the rules of await apply over here. None of this should be surprising. Okay, so that was a kind of a side demo. Let's go back to our main thing. Here we go. So we were kind of building this thing, and I was showing you how we can fetch data. How can I use routing in Qwik? Right, so routing comes with it, right? So in our component, we have a source folder, and inside of the source folder, we have routes. And the file, so the directories create routes, right? So we were showing the watch demo. Just by putting it in the watch folder, I have it working. By creating a folder called GitHub user slug, I now have a URL that matches GitHub and then whatever the piece of text that's in here, and this piece of text gets extracted, right? So if instead of Hevery, I put in here builder IO, then I will get data for builder IO, right? And so that's just a normal behavior of the site. So the routing is built in to Qwik. Let's see where we did. Oh, so this was auth. What are we doing here? Oh, auth. I'm gonna skip auth because we don't have all the time for it. Let's see, we have about an hour. Okay, so, oh yeah, but we can't do, okay, actually we have to do auth. Okay, let's set up auth. Let's say we wanted to do auth. So we need to set up auth, so we install a auth integration, and we need to put this piece of code in Vite. I think it goes here. is it not formatting? What's going on? Sweet. Okay. So let's go and run it again. Okay. So I already set up the environment files. So one of the things that by installing the auth integration, we created a special file called plugin auth. And the way the route loaders and server dialer and all these things work is that it has to be exported. And so what we're doing is we're exporting a on request. That means that's part of the middleware. So that's how the auth talks to see what's going on. And then the auth provides us with actions and with data. So we have use auth session, sign in and signed out. Now, Qwik also has this idea of layouts. So if we go to the root layout, layout TSX, then what we can see is that we have our header, main, and slot is where the site data goes into. So what we can do here is we can say, right, so if I, for example, say use auth session, and I go back to our code, oh, right, because, sorry, because this has to say private. There we go. You see that we can, insert text into the header, and this header can live anywhere. So what we should do is we should insert whether you're currently logged in. So the way we would do this is we would say const no. Okay, so in this particular case, it will print nothing, right? So really, if we don't have a value, right? So if we have no value, then we should print login, and then otherwise we need to have a logout. So it's wait, what? Auth session. Oh, sorry. User. If I have a user, then what? Why does it? How does it? Do I have? No, I'm not logged in. Why is it saying that? Oh no. Sorry, I got this backwards. Right. If I don't have a user, then I should be able to log in. So let's implement the login part of the code right here. So we probably want to have a button that says login like this, right? So now it's a button that I should be able to click on. Of course, it doesn't do anything because we haven't hooked it up. So let's hook it up. Let's create a form. And now we need to have a use auth sign in action. So const auth sign in. That's provided with the integration. And so now in action is, we can put that in here and import it. So now we have a button, and if I log in, the auth will take over and says, hey, do you want to log in with GitHub? And we can do that. And yes, come on. And so now we're logged in, and so now it says logout, right? So it goes to the other part. So really the thing to show over here is we should just print auth, auth session value user, like this. And so now, whoa, user dot email. And so now it says, hey, welcome back, right? So it knows who I am. And the next thing to do would be to create an image. Image source auth session value user image. Why are you? Oh, because I forgot to close you. Okay. And so we have that. Let's add width is, let's say, 25, height 25, and there we go. So now I'm logged in. Probably that's too small. And I'm logged in, and now I should be able to also have a logout button, right? So we would do the same exact thing in here, except instead of sign in, we would do sign out, log out, sign out. And voila. So we're logged in. I can click log out. Now I can click log back in and go through GitHub, and I'm back in here. Okay. Notice, by the way, that it's complaining about CLS. This is something that happens in a dev mode where the framework is telling you, like, hey, that was a layout shift, which means the way you structured your HTML, maybe you forgot image sizes or something like that, something is weird about it, and as a result, you're going to be penalized by Core Web Vitals when you finally go into production. So we provide this information to you as soon as possible that something is strange going on in here. Let's see. So we did authentication, and I showed you how you can kind of work with that particular information. So let's go to the next part. Okay, so in our user, we can create a new file, index.tsx, and so GitHub user, right here we create a new file. And in this file, we're basically going to do the same exact thing. So just in the interest of the time, I'm just going to copy this and paste it here. Just to kind of go over it, we again get these types that we did earlier. We have a route loader, which runs on a server. It gets the user and a repo and makes a call to GitHub. That gives it the information with the access token, with whatever the data gets back, it sends back in here. On a client, we get a hold of it, and we create an output, right? So if I go back to my application, we should make these clickable. So let's make those clickable. So this should be href. And this should be clickable, so it should be slash GitHub slash repo.full name. So now if I'm here, I can click on any of these. Let's say we do Qwik, and now we navigate to the new route, right? Hevery / Qwik. That's the one that I cut and pasted, and this route has all of the information that we need. And so that this is this route right here, which shows the details for a specific repo with the data. Oops. Okay. Now I did all this stuff because I wanted to show you a next bit. And the next bit is, imagine we wanted to do some interactivity. What's it for? Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with Supabase. Let me show you how Supabase works. Supabase is kind of cool. I already have it installed. Okay, run. And if I go here, I think that thing might be sleeping, so let's have to wake it up. The workshop is here. I've already set up a database earlier, and this database is running. Okay, perfect. Okay, so database is running, so I don't have to do anything. Okay, so what we would like is we would like to have a button in here. And this button should show whether or not we have favorited the code. So where is the code for the button? Here. Oh, look at that. It even has other things in there. Okay, let's just take that. Okay. So there's a button that will change its style and a star based on whether or not is its favorite. So for now, I'm just going to cheat and I'm going to just say its favorite signal is, let's say, true. Import. Okay, so if we go to the UI, you see that there is a star in here. Can we move it like here? So the idea is that I'm saying, oh, this is my favorited repo. So I've added a favorite part of it. And then hopefully if I click on it, it will go in and out. So now we have to have a way of talking to a database, right, to update this particular data. So the first thing we want to do is this data should, instead of being hard-coded in here, it should really come from the server. And so for that, we need to do a route loader. So const use is favorited is a route loader. Okay, and so here instead of, and so here we're going to do return math random 50%. Okay, and so this is going to return true or false on random, and then here we're going to just call it. So now, when I go and refresh the page, sometimes it's going to be favorited and sometimes it's not, right? To be kind of random. So what we really want is that this information shouldn't be random, it should really come from a database. But now we are running this piece of code on a server. So So the first thing is we're going to just collect some data. So we're going to collect we're going to collect email, user, and repo. So console on so you can see that on a server, every time this page refreshes, it's trying to fetch the data, right? And it's basically saying this piece of code is executing, and it looks like you are currently logged in as Miško@hevery.com, and this is your user and repo, and that information comes from the URL right here. I see somebody's asking, is Qwik and RxJS possible? The answer is yes. Just like Redux, signals make it unnecessary, and the problem is that RxJS is not serializable. So you would have to create the RxJS graph eagerly on the client, which basically means you're kind of back in the territory of doing hydration. So while it's possible to use it, I don't think it's really a recommended best way to do that. And then later on, I'm going to show you how to do things like debouncing using signals, and it's pretty straightforward. We'll get to it in a little later. Okay, so we have this, and now I want to talk to the database. So I'm sorry, I'm just gonna copy this code in the interest of time. Okay, so that goes here. So we're saying, look, if you have an email, then go and talk to the Supabase, and you're gonna need the Supabase URL and key, and so that creates a Supabase client. And once you have the Supabase client, I want you to run a query in Supabase that basically says, from the favorites table, go to see if email, user, and repo are available in there. So if I go back here and go here, you can see that here is email, user, and repo, right? And so we can see who everybody's in there. And if you get the data, then if you find anything, then it's true. Otherwise, it's false. Why is this unhappy with me? Because this. Okay. So now with this information, if we navigate to our application, you see that this particular thing is not favorited. But if I go to maybe Angular, I don't know what's the other ones I had. No. Okay, hold on. Which one do I have? Builder. Oh, I don't have anything. No, wait. Miško, Hevery, Builder.io, Mitosis, Partytown. Okay. So, I see. Builder.io, Mitosis. Right. This one is favorited. So that one's coming from the database and it's favorited. Okay. So the next part is I want to be able to click on this button and actually change the database. And so route loader is the way we get the data to the client. And so the opposite is route action. So export const use set favorite request action action. Okay, just like before, we're gonna grab all of this code and we're gonna put this here. And so this is data request. Okay. And we're gonna get the stuff out of there earlier. Okay, so then we want to say, let's say we want to have set favorite. No, let's just say favorite. And so we print email, user, repo, and favorite, like this. Now that we have this action, we can use it, const. Okay, like this. And so this button gets surrounded by a form. Oh, the reason why it's a form is because we want to make sure that it works even if JavaScript is not enabled. And so we just want to, in the case of a form, we just want to do a normal browser post request. So I'll show this in a second. Action, set favorite, this has to be imported. Okay. So now, whenever I click this button, it will say, set. Oops. Okay. Whenever I click this button, it will say set is favorited, right? So me clicking now executes this piece of code on a server. It doesn't quite do anything yet. Now, let me show you what I meant by the JavaScript. So if I disable JavaScript, right, no JavaScript, this button still works. And you can see, here, let me clear this. If I click, you can still see that the button works because it's just a regular form. And this is a button that just happens to auto submit and makes a request to the server. So even if JavaScript is disabled, this works. But that's not how we normally use it. We use it with JavaScript enabled. And so now if I click, it's not a full refresh, but instead it's getting intercepted, and we send a fetch request to a special location where we are emulating as if we're doing a full refresh, but no full refresh is actually happening. Okay, so we call this piece of code, and notice the favorited part is empty, it's undefined. So we want to define this particular bit right here. And so the way we do that is when you have a form, you create a input, and the input is hidden, and the value of it is well, sorry, name is oh right, because it wants to be a string. So if we currently favorited, we don't want to be favorited, and if we are not favorited, then we do want to be favorited, right? Because we're changing the state to the other side. And so now when I click this button, notice that it prints nothing because it's kind of hard to see, because this favorite is basically this empty string. Let's do this JSON stringify. Okay, here we go. So now if I click this button, you can see that it's printing an empty string, like it's sending an empty data. And if you hover over favorited, you can see that the type of it is JSON value. Basically, the system's like, I don't know, something comes here, you do something useful with it. But what we can do is we can do Zod. Zod is a type validation library, and we can also use valibot as well. And in Zod, you can say favorite is z dot boolean. No, z dot boolean. Like this. And so now if you're doing a boolean, and now if I click on it, I'm gonna get a exception, because Zod's like saying, hey, you told me I'm gonna get a boolean over here, but I got a string. And so this isn't gonna go. Like I'm validating the stuff that you asked me to validate. And that's because forms can only submit string values. You cannot submit any other type. And so what you wanna do is you wanna say course, saying like, I know it's a string, but like try to get it into a boolean. And so now if I hit this button, you see that it gets serialized into false, right? It's not a string, which is empty string, it's now actually false value. And more importantly, if you hover over the favorite, you see that now favorite type isn't just like generic JSON value, it's now a specific thing called boolean. So it's like basically saying like, hey, this is gonna be a boolean right now. So we have all the pieces, and now we just have to talk to the database. So just like before, we are going to copy this piece of code here. Just like before, we're going to do this, but we are going to delete this stuff here. Okay, so we connect to the database, and now we have to do something useful with it. And I am also going to just cheat here a little bit, and right. So this is a piece of code we have here. Okay, so what we're saying is if we have favorite, if favorite is true, and we're logged in, we have email. I guess that's unnecessary because we're being logged in. Then go and do an upsert into the database. Upsert is basically means if it's already there, don't do anything. But if it's not there, go and add it. But actually we are also missing a piece of code that I missed. Oh yeah, this is the piece of code that I missed. Okay, actually, let me just copy the whole thing because I'm not doing this right. Why are you complaining? Supabase client is right there. It's right here. Oh, because it's in a different block. Sorry, I see. Okay, so if I'm logged in, if I have an email, then connect to Supabase and then delete whatever I have in the database right now. But then if it's favorited, then go and put back the thing that you have, right? So if it's not favorited, then we will just do a delete. If it is favorited, we're gonna delete everything's in case there's like multiple copies of something in there, and then we're just gonna keep exactly one item in here. So now that when we go to our application, we have our button, and I can click on it, and it will go and update, as you can see. It will go back and forth. And that's because not only is the route action causing this piece of code to run, whenever you're making a trip to the server, you're also rerunning the route loader. So the action modifies the database, and then the loader executes, and loader gets the new data, and then the new data then updates the UI. So now we have a button that goes and back and forth, and you can interact with it. Yeah. Okay, I will do one more thing, and then we will call it a day. So, all right. So let's go to the root. So we're inside of here, GitHub, and let's make a new file, index.tsx, and q-component. Okay. So now we have a new route, and the new route is just this one. And just says hello Qwik, right? And so what we want in there is we want to be able to, first of all, get some data. So export search, let's do the filter, use signal. Okay, and now we want to make a input, so say search, input, yep, filter, what am I doing, export const. And so now just for fun, we're gonna print it out. Okay, so I have a search box, and I can type into the search box, and it updates on the other side. Nothing really that exciting, right? What I really would like to do is have it debug. So we're going to use this data to search. So if I type in Hevery, I want to be able to search on a GitHub repo, but I don't want to spam the server with like bajillion requests, right? As I type every single character. So I really want to debounce the value. So let's make a debounced value. And what I really want to show is the debounce value over here, not that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a task. So use task. And here we're going to get a track. And we're going to say const value equals track filter that value. And we're going to create a timeout. Yes, that is correct. And then we're going to say, yep, perfect. Autopilot is being very helpful. So, okay. So the code here, actually, we can simplify it even further. Okay. So what we're saying is, look, keep track of this value. Whenever this value changes, I want you to re-execute this particular function. And whenever the value changes, set a timer for 1 second. Right? That might be too much. Let's set a timer for 300 milliseconds. And then when the timer goes off, I want you to update the debounce value with the current value. And if there is a new request that comes in, like if you type a new character, actually clear the timer, right? So throw it away and set up a new timer basically for it. So that as long as you're typing, this thing gets delayed. And so now what we have is I can start typing here. And then when I wait, it updates. You don't see the intermediary values, you just see the stuff before that. Now, RX people will be like, but I have an operator that I can just put here and get the same exact value result. And absolutely, yes, RxJS can do that in one single thing. I'm going to argue that RxJS is kind of complicated to learn. And the second problem that I see with RxJS is that the stack traces in RxJS are impossible to read. I mean, there is essentially no useful data in there. The other problem with RxJS is that it has something called glitches, where you can see intermediary value under certain circumstances. It happens when you have a diamond dependency problem, when you have RxJS that has a root node that splits up to two, and then it combines it into the new one. When that happens, the combination, sometimes we'll see half of the, we'll see this one update, but this one's not updated and something like that. So there are kind of things. So I personally think, I know this is a personal opinion, but I personally think that RxJS, that something like signals is much easier to work with, it's much easier to explain. There are no weird stack traces that, what's going on. And so I personally find it an easier thing to do. And again, I'm going to point out that outside of Angular, RxJS is not really used in other frameworks. Now, having said all that, there are certain cases where what RxJS does is just perfect and it is exactly what you need, right? For example, fetching the data from the server and retrying, etc. Perfect use case for RxJS. I'm just saying that RxJS is an overkill for many UI-based things, and it makes it a little more complicated than you have to have it. And so I think this is a simpler way to approach the problem. But again, this is all, a lot of it is basically opinions, is in a realm of opinions and in a realm of what you think is easier and better. So you cannot really talk about these things in absolute value. And yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying that's true. There is no absolute. There are just opinions, and everything works in a place. That's what
Yeah.
I'm asking.
Okay, somebody's asking, does Qwik use virtual DOM? Yes and no. It's a little complicated. So let's dive into this particular thing. Yes, it uses virtual DOM. It's a good kind of approximation to the way you think about it. However, like for example, in this case over here, let me refresh the page, look at the network tab. What is this? DevTools and image. All right. Okay. So yeah. Sorry. Ignore these two things. This has to do with image optimization. So if I go in here, let me clear this. There is no JavaScript, and then when I type something like ABC, oh sorry, I'm in the fetch, not in JavaScript. Sorry. Let's go here. There we go. Okay, that's better. Okay. So if I type something in here, like I'm Hevery, notice the code showed up. Now let's look at what showed up. What showed up is the listener, basically the bind value, right? So it's this part right here. This part right here is a shorthand for this piece of code over here. So that showed up. The framework showed up. Then there's this build thing that shows up that disappears in production. And then this is the task. Task showed up right here as well, right? So this is the code. This is this code right here. When you type, this had to re-execute. So those are the pieces of code that showed up. Notice what didn't show up. The component itself, right? As a matter of fact, if I go and put in console.log render, it prints render on a server, but if I go and interact with it, there is no render on the client, right? It works, there's no render on the client. So in this particular case, even though you can say that Qwik uses JSX, this particular component can re-render without VDOM being present. And so Qwik makes a distinction and says like, look, if this component can't be re-rendered without VDOM, then we're just going to re-render it without VDOM. On the other hand, if there is a structural change to the output, and because it's a structural change, we have to know what the JSX is. In that particular case, the Qwik will revert to a VDOM. So it uses VDOM sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. Now, the other thing to understand is that if you're in a system like React, when you do a VDOM, you start basically at the root of the application, and you build the VDOM for the whole thing. And then you diff the VDOM for the whole thing. Whereas Qwik only does VDOM for a particular component that is currently being interacted with. So if a component is not being interacted with, you are not basically bringing that VDOM in or paying for it, etc. So even in the worst case scenario where every single component you have requires VDOM, only a tiny fractions of those components actually re-execute their VDOM because most of these components are static and don't need to be rendered. Right? So people will oftentimes say like, oh, Qwik uses VDOM, therefore it must be slow. Well, it's not the correct way to look at it, because the reason systems like React are slow not necessarily is because the VDOM they create is for the whole app all the time. Whereas Qwik skips most of the components. Only the components that need to re-render get re-rendered. And only if they are a structural change to the VDOM, only then VDOM gets brought in. So the end result is that most of the time, the amount of code that you are downloading, executing, etc., is a super tiny fractions. And so it's not actually a problem in terms of in the production. Maybe you can ask the other question of like, why does the Qwik have to use VDOM? And that has to do with the fact that systems like, we could do more stuff like what solid.js does, but that would require that the JSX in here would have to get really, really finely chopped up. And that is problematic because we would basically have to introduce $ everywhere, and basically complicated set of reasons why it is not possible to do what Solid does. And the reason why Solid can get away with it is because Solid downloads the whole application at the beginning during hydration and executes it, right? So if you are willing to do that, then you can get rid of VDOM. If on the other hand you say, no, I don't want to download the whole thing and execute everything, I want to do this lazy loaded stuff, then what Solid does becomes difficult, and instead we basically opt in for this hybrid model. So these are all trade-offs that you kind of go into. Okay, next question is, does Qwik have any downsides? Excellent questions. I love it. That is a good question. I wouldn't say necessarily downsides. I would call it more like trade-offs, right? There are different things that you have to think about. The first thing to point out is that Qwik is a general purpose framework, meaning that you can build anything you want with it. Just like whatever you can build in React, Angular, Vue, Svelte, Solid, etc., you can build with Qwik as well. So in that sense, it's equivalent. There are other solutions like Astro, which are not general purpose things. Like if you go to the Astro website, it says directly in their website is like, we are optimized for content building sites. You go here, you go to documentation, I think it's getting started, maybe, I don't know, somewhere it is. Why Astro? Here we go. And basically, they're basically telling you, like, if you want to build a real application, Astro is not for you. We are for a content-focused website, which is a marketing speak for like, yeah, if your website is mostly static, Astro is a perfect thing for you, right? And if your website is mostly static, Astro and Qwik will perform about the same. But if your website becomes highly interactive, then Astro will basically devolve into a whole bunch of islands that have to be eagerly hydrated, which means it will devolve into basically whatever the underlying technology is, whereas Qwik will maintain its performance. Okay, so that kind of sets the thing. So the then question becomes like, what are the downsides? So the downsides are you have to learn new stuff, right? So first of all, you have to learn signals. But given that all of the frameworks are heading towards the signal direction, I don't necessarily think that's a downside, but it is a new thing to learn. And also you have to learn these $signs. And these $signs, first of all, it's not like I can not put it in here. Like the TypeScript is going to scream at me saying like, hey, It's required. Like, it's not like you have a choice here. But these dollar signs have implications about serializability. So let me show you an example. So here's a use task, and we have a timeout here, and we can, for example, say const delay equals 300, and here we, instead of that, we say delay, right? That still works because the value delay can be serialized, and so everything is happy. But what if I say promise dot result? Sorry, promise also works. New string 300. Okay. Now notice what it's saying. It's complaining to you, saying like, hey, when referencing delay inside of a different scope, so with the dollar sign, we cross the dollar sign boundary, Qwik needs to serialize the value. However, it is in the instance of string. Now, we could serialize a string, but because it's a capital S, not lowercase s, it's kind of not recognizing it as a value. And so it's saying like, hey, I don't know how to serialize an uppercase string, right? Because there's a difference between lowercase and uppercase string. And so as a result, I'm like, this is going to be a problem, right? And so it's giving you this error saying like, hey, you can't do this, right? Maybe string is not the best thing of my class. Like if you had a my class here, my class, something like this, right? It's basically saying the same thing, like saying like, hey, I don't know what this is. Like, I don't know how to deal with this stuff. So you have to understand serialization. Other example of that would be like, oh, what if this is a function like this? And then we just invoke the function over here, right? Same exact problem. Basically it's saying like, look, I don't know how to deal with this, but in this case, it's giving you a solution. It's saying like, okay, you have to wrap the function with a dollar sign, right? So it basically says in order to make this serializable, you have to wrap it like so. And then this needs to be await. And this has to be async. Right? And so now everything is back to normal and the system can deal with it. So there are rules around serialization when it comes to dollar sign boundaries, and it is a thing that you have to kind of understand and use. Now, in practice, whenever people ask questions on our Discord and are working and building websites, these serialization rules come up surprisingly little. Like even I'm surprised how little it comes up. And I think it has to do with the fact that people are kind of already used to this, because if you're using Next.js, the props, the get server props already has to be serializable there as well. And so I think people are kind of already used to this kind of a constraint. So that's not really a surprise in there. But that's kind of the trade-off. And finally, Qwik is a new framework, right? Because it's a new framework, the amount of code that you can find online, the amount of examples, convincing people, third-party libraries, all of that is work in progress in there. But I want to make a distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic limitations, right? The lack of documentation knowledge and people who know it, that's an extrinsic problem that's going to be solved in time. You just have to wait. Whereas the way the serialization works and the dollar sign works, like that constraint will stay here forever. So that's an intrinsic property of the thing. But that's kind of hopefully it gives you an idea of kind of the limitations, etc. But I think overall, once you kind of understand resumability and understand these rules, and once you learn it, you really have to wonder of like, why are we doing hydration? Like that seems like a really inefficient way to cause all this code to download, execute, and has to be rerun, etc. And so I think resumability is just a fundamentally better approach to way apps work. Hopefully that answers your question. What about Qwik component testing? Okay, that's another good question. You should be able to test it just like any other framework. There should be no surprises in there. We worked really hard. So there's this piece of tool called Optimizer. Optimizer takes your code and breaks it up into pieces. And that's it knows to break it up because there's a dollar sign. But we really worked hard to make sure that the code still runs even if Optimizer is not present, right? Even if you don't run it through the Optimizer, the code works. It's just like you're basically downloading the whole world. And so it's inefficient in that sense, but it still works. And so in your tests, it's still possible to have tests and work with tests, etc. It just becomes, it still works, and you don't have to run optimizer. Really, the optimizer is kind of like a runtime performance thing that happens later on. But testing is really no different than testing any other framework. There should be no surprises in there. Okay, we were talking about this bit right here. Okay, so where were we? Okay, so I already showed server dollar, but let me show this again actually here. Let's cut and paste this code. Okay, so we have our component here that does the search, and let me delete all this stuff. I'm gonna back to where it was. Okay. So let's create a fetch users function, and a fetch users function basically does the same thing we did before, but instead of being inside of a route loader, it is in just a standalone RPC, right? So route loaders execute at the beginning of page load, but sometimes you just want to be able to talk to the server or database like whenever, right? And so this is where server dollar comes in. Server dollar allows you to do execution whenever time you want, whereas route loaders only work at the beginning. But what the route loaders can do is that route loaders can run parallel, and they can start streaming the response before the route loader is finished. And obviously the response is going to block until the route loader gets the right code, but at least you can send the header and a bunch of other stuff to the client. Okay, so we have our fetch user here, just complaining that it's not used, and we do the same exact thing. We call a fetch on the GitHub API. We have this query function in here, and everything passes in. So the thing to do now is to go and invoke this code, right? So we have a use resource, and use resource is a synchronous task that returns data. So track. So now we're going to say is const query is track. We track the debounced value, right? And if I have a query, then I would really like to call fetch users, and we would like to return the data from here. So the data we just get back is just a list of items. And right, and so const, and so this is users equals, okay? Now, the type of users you can see here is it's going to be a resource return, which basically is a promise, and it's going to give us this particular data. So what we do here is we create a resource. Users. Actually, it should be called user resource. Users resource. Okay. I need to import this. Is it already imported? Okay. On pending. So on pending, we would like to say loading. Right. And then once it's resolved, on resolved, we would be users. And so we do users.map user li. Okay, come on. User dot full name. What is it? User. No, or what is it? I thought it was full name. No? Email. Sure. Okay, what is complaining about? Unresolved. why? Oh, because here we need to return. Okay. Okay, users. Oh, right, because this needs to be ordered list. Okay, and you need to have a key. Okay, so we basically have all the parts. Let's see if this is going to work. So if I say Hevery, yes, of course, because what am I downloading here? Okay, I'm going to cheat. What is it? Login. Okay. Okay, let's try this again. And then maybe the loading should be a div. Be on the bottom. There we go, and it works. Of course, there seems to be somebody who really, really loves me in this world, but we'll leave that for a different day. Is there any quick tool for debugging and detailed app insights and components and tree inspection? You're basically asking for dev tools. There is, but it's not as advanced yet. But there are people in the community who are already working on it. Here you go. Here's the dev tools. So you can go and execute this piece of code. Let me show you how to do that. So if you go here and execute this, oh, okay. It seems to be a bug in there because it doesn't know how to parse it. Is that how I'm supposed to read this? Okay. Here, let's try a simpler. I feel like we discovered a bug. Oh, this is broken. Huh, this is broken. Okay, looks like I have some fixing to do. Sorry about that. But yeah, this thing basically allows you to tell you basically how the application is structured. So let's talk about that for a second. So you see that the app has something called a container and a base. So every single app has that, and because of that, it's really, really easy to do micro frontends, and we can talk about that later. And you can see these extra comments. This tells the framework where the component boundaries are, and so the framework can reason about the components without having to execute all of the code, right? So without having to execute all the code, the framework knows where the components are. And also, the framework knows that this is a button because it says on click. And this is how it kind of gets that information as well. And finally, the state of the system is inside of this Qwik JSON. So this basically stores everything that the Qwik needs to execute the app. And yeah, I'm surprised that, oh, because of the layout. Oh, I know what's happening. Okay, hold on. I think I can fix it. Layout. We did this super cool layout here, but I think that's what's breaking it. I mean, it's still a bug. It should be fixed. Yes, I bet you that's what it is. So if I go and import it, here you go. Okay, so I know why it's breaking now. So what it's showing you is basically it says, look, you have this component right here that is being serialized. You can click on it. And so this is the component that exists in the system. And this component has no listeners, there's no props on it. And the data we serialized is we serialized an array, and this array contained the initial value A and B, right? That's the initial value that comes up over here. And also there is a listener right here. So this button has a listener, and it is listening on click. And when you go and interact with the on click, then we download this piece of code and we execute this stuff. And it captures, the on-click captures these two pieces of code. So it captures, it captures the array, right? So this array is this array right here. So you can kind of see what's going on in the system using these dev tools. And I have to fix that other bug. Sorry about that. But this is getting turned into a nice UI. So there are people working in a community to turn this into proper dev tools in here. But it's going to come eventually. Okay, does using JSX in Qwik cause any problems for the SEO? I don't think so, because the JSX, the SEO never sees, I mean, SEO really only sees HTML, right? And to kind of, to prove the point, right, you can go and, actually, let's go to Qwik Builder.io. You can just turn off JavaScript, right? And when you turn off JavaScript, you should have a pretty good idea of how the page, what the SEO will see, right? No JavaScript, and that's what SEO sees. So SEO sees all of this stuff. You can click around. This is what we see. If we, for example, go to tutorial, yeah, the tutorial doesn't work. It's broken. We disabled the JavaScript, but all this other code still does. And the SEO can walk around and index all of this information. So because Qwik is really SSR first, it's all about SSRing your content and then interactivity as needed. Because of that, it is very SEO friendly. Actually, I actually want to make a point out of this. The way most frameworks are built is that every single framework you look at is really CSR first. It's client-side rendering first, right? If you look at AngularJS, Angular, React, Vue, Svelte, Solid, whatever you want, every one of these frameworks is a CSR framework, client-side render, right? They don't care about server at all. And then all of these frameworks have a meta framework associated with it, like Next.js, like Analog for Angular, SvelteKit, Solid, and so on. And those meta frameworks is the part that does SSR rendering for you. But because the framework is fundamentally CSR, what happens is the server does rendering of the HTML, but then in order to make the client work, we have to re-execute the application because the client doesn't understand SSR, right? That's what hydration is. Hydration is just rerunning the application all in client-side mode. That's fundamentally what it is, right? You're just rerunning it. And because of that, the frameworks really don't understand this particular bit. So the way Qwik is different is Qwik isn't CSR first, it's SSR first. It's all about server-side rendering. As a matter of fact, Qwik, even without the Qwik City, which is our meta framework, even without Qwik City, Qwik is all about SSR. So SSR is a fundamental property of the Qwik framework, and it's SSR first, and then add interactivity. So I think that's a kind of a big difference there. Okay, we are almost at time, and I think I've shown you all of the pieces that I wanted to. So I'm just going to leave it at questions.
Yeah, thank you. It was a very informative session, actually. You just moved around the whole thing in Qwik. I see why it's magical, actually. I have a question from my side concerning the plugins or the tools that might need that we might need as developers while coding Qwik. Is there any VS Code, for example, or to autocomplete or for the
Yeah, can you hear me? Because something was wrong with my microphone. Can you hear me? Or?
yeah, I can
Okay.
hear. Yeah.
There is nothing specific. I mean, what it is, we have linters, right? So, where are we? So we had our, here, let's close these things. Okay, so we have linters. So again, like, this is not a good example, sorry. Let's go to /index tsx. Okay, so here we have a use resource, right? You know, an example would be like, hey, I want to here, this thing is going to be, if I do something like this.
I see that GitHub Copilot is it's already there.
Yeah. So this is an example of a linter, right? This is not a VS Code specific thing. It's just a linter telling you like, hey, this isn't gonna fly. So we do
Yeah.
have tooling to kind of guide you along to show you what's going on, etc. But there is, I believe, somebody made an extension which has what is this? Code snippets.
Yeah. Composition.
Oh, and autocomplete. Wow, I didn't even know about these. Actually, I'm learning new stuff. Look at that. Oh, that's right. So this is the autocomplete that I have. Okay, this is the thing that gives you the code snippets like this one. You know, component,
Yeah.
all of these particular things that are in there. So yeah, so that's basically what you get.
I see.
And because Qwik is on top of JSX, you know, JSX has linters and formatters and editor support, et cetera,
Yeah.
So you get a lot of benefits out of the box in there. So as far as I would say, the developer experience actually is really good. I would say the I just kind of lost my train of thought. Right, the kind of the shortcoming right now is more about third-party libraries, right? Like the extrinsic, the ecosystem has to catch up
Yeah.
to what
The
everybody else has.
community. Yeah.
Is Qwik good at building multi-page applications? It is the default, yes. So NPAs is kind of the bread and butter for Qwik, but you can also make it a SPA. So let me show you this. I think this is kind of important to kind of show. Let's go to GitHub. GitHub/mhevery. Okay. So here's my repositories, right? So if you go to the network tab, if I go and let's clear this. When I go and click on Angular, that's a multi-page application, right? It went and then fetched a separate page. But let's go back and let's change this a little bit. So GitHub/user index, here we go. So this is the link, right? All I have to do is change it to a link like this, import. Okay, all I did is I changed it from ahref to a link. And now, what do I mean it's not defined? It's right here, no? Okay, here we go. Okay, so now let's navigate from here to the other place. Now if I do a navigation, notice it's a SPA navigation. It's not an NPA, right? We did not load any more HTML. Instead, we just downloaded the code necessary to re-render the page to get to the second place, right? And so it's a different kind of behavior. So you can do both. You can do NPA or SPA, depending on what you need. So it's kind of a hybrid thing, and it's really muddies the water about what is a server and what is a client. It becomes very like, yeah, we can do both.
Yeah. There is this other question: how's the learning curve for Qwik?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if you're a React developer, the learning curve is very shallow because all you have to do is, you know, let's go back over here. All the things that you know in React basically apply. The thing that that is different, where is this? Is you need to wrap components in component $. The buttons have a $sign over there. You need to know, you already know about hooks, so that you don't have to learn anything new, but you, instead of using use store, you have to use state. You use either use store or use signal. Instead of use effect, you use tasks. So there's a really easy mapping between the two. And as a matter of fact, if you go to docs, React, Qwik versus React, like, you know, we give you lots of examples of like, this is what the equivalent stuff looks like between, and they match up pretty good. So if you're a React developer, you should not have any surprises in there. Again, the only thing you have to learn is signals, which the world is going there anyways, and you have to learn the code extraction, which is the $sign. But for the most part, you can go pretty far before you understand what's happening under the hood with the $sign, because most things just work exactly how you would expect. So I think the learning curve is pretty shallow, and I think that actually works against us, because people come and they look at Qwik and they're like, oh, this looks just like React. I already have React. Why do I need another framework? And they leave, completely missing the point that it's not about the DX, although we have good DX and you're super powerful, you can do many things that I hopefully showed you today. It is really about what happens under the hood, right? That's the magical bit, right? In there. And actually, speaking of DX, let me do one more thing to kind of point out. Let's hold on. This is an image, right? These are all images. Ugh. Okay, so let's grab me. Copy, save, image. So we save it to downloads. No. No. Sandbox. I think we're over here. So. Oh, here we go. That's me. Okay. So check this out. Let's say I want to have my image. So I'm going to say image source. Okay. So first of all, notice it's complaining to you, saying like, hey, you know, you should do it in a different way. But let's just go with this for a second. And if I go to watch, here's the image, right? And notice it's complaining, saying like, hey, this thing is causing a layout shift because you don't have width and height. So you should probably add width and height. Do you want to fix this? And when I hit the auto fix button, notice it refactors my code. And this image now is not image source, it's now image Hevery. And this thing got imported from a special location with a JSX in the URL. And now when I go and navigate here, if I go to elements and go here, notice that the image has a source set. It has different size images depending on how big the device that you happen to be using is. And so you get image optimization kind of out of the box in this really, really nice way. The other thing I forgot to talk about is that you can actually run React components inside of Qwik. So if there is like a React library that you want to use, or you know, like Material UI or something like that, it is possible to run React components inside of Qwik. They basically work the same way as Astro Islands, but I think we have a nicer DX, but I don't have time to kind of demo it. Oh, is Qwik supporting pre-rendering static pages like Next.js does? Yes, you can do both SSR and SSG, and as a matter of fact, you can have a hybrid world. So if we go here, this is all SSG, but if you go to like an example, let's see, where's an example here? If you go to this example that's showing a joke, I mean, this one is essentially static, but this is SSR. This is part of our documentation. This is SSR. So every time you hit it, you're doing a request. So there's a mix and match you can do in there. So you can do full SSG as well. Does it have a similar component lifecycle as React? Ooh, excellent question. Yes and no. So yes, in the sense that, like, you know, if you are familiar with React, you're going to be very familiar with Qwik. So in that sense, yes. However, there is one big difference, and that is that we have what we call, again, the unified execution model. So let's say you have a React component that has a on-mount and on-mount hook, right? Well, the way this would work is that the on-mount would run on a server as part of SSR, and then it will run again as part of the hydration on a client. Whereas in Qwik world, the unmount would run on a server as part of the SSR, but it would not rerun as part of the client in the browser because it already ran on a server. And then if you do an unmount, the unmount would run inside of the client. So the life cycle is the same, but it's spreading between the server and the client. It's again, it's unified execution model. You don't run it twice. You run it just once. It just happens to be that at the beginning you were running it on a server, and towards the end you were running it in the client. All right, I think we're coming to the end of time. So, if you maybe have one more questions, otherwise I have to get going.
Yeah. Uh,
Yes, you are a
really,
great audience, awesome questions. I appreciate you took the time to listen to me. Hopefully, I have convinced you that Qwik is way different. It is not, I oftentimes say that if you're choosing a framework, Angular, React, Vue, Svelte, and all these frameworks, right? You're really just choosing different syntax. But fundamentally, the way the frameworks work is pretty much the same. The syntax is different, but it works the same under the hood. With Qwik, the syntax is the same. It's very similar to React, but it works very, very, very differently under the hood. And the main goal that Qwik has is fast page startup. And we can do that very simply by not executing JavaScript eagerly, right? And so all the machinery you need for not executing the code machinery just comes out of the box with Qwik. And that's the real difference between Qwik and everybody else.
maybe I'll add a question from my side. It's a general one. Like the idea behind Qwik, how does it start? How did the idea came to your mind? How does it take to like you begin the development of this library?
Yeah. So it actually came to me. Well, it's not that it specifically came to me. There are other, we always stand on the shoulders of giants of other things. There's things that you've seen and were inspired by. So Google has an internal framework called Wiz, and Wiz has kind of resemblance to resumability, but it's much more complicated to use. And so in Wiz, you can kind of do these things, but the DX is not very good because it's an old framework and etc. But that's what kind of inspired me. And then in ngConf in 2019, I gave a talk in ngConf, basically laying out how a resumable framework might work. And I actually have a copy of it, so I'm going to share. I'm going to share this. I can put it in the chat. How do I put it in the chat? Right here. Okay. I don't know what's happening. Here's the link. I'm going to just paste it to you, and maybe you can share it with the chat.
Ah,
I don't
okay.
know what's going on here. Oh, I see. Oh, okay. All right, I see. I have to authenticate, etc. I need to get going. I'm sorry. I'm always out of time here. But, oh yeah, perfect. You pasted it in there.
Yeah,
You can watch that and you'll see that I basically laid out how this thing would work back in 2019. And it was kind of in the back of my mind. And then a few years ago, I decided like, hey, let's try to build it because I really felt like that the world needed to solve this particular problem. I don't see how hydration, I think hydration is a big problem and there's no easy way to solve it. And so this is where Qwik comes in. Anyways, you were awesome. I need to get going.
thank
And
you.
so I
Thank you
will
very much for
chat.
your time, for accepting the invitation first, and for the time
Okay, you're welcome.
you give to us. Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome. So now your job is to go tell all your friends how much different it is and how much you enjoyed it. All right, I gotta go. Bye.
Thank you. شكرا لكم الدراري بزاف على بقيتو معنا في اللايف حتى الاخر. دونك هنا كنكونو وصلنا للاخر تاع اللايف تاعنا. الا عندكم دي كيسيون بوزيوهم في لاباج ولا بوزيوهم نيت في لي كومونتير. غاديو نشوفهم ابخي. تسناونا ان شاء الله في دي لايف اخرين افيك دوطخ بيرسوناج لي تا هما ان شاء الله سبيسيال. و يا جود باي.